or Icelanders, because we've imported our slave labor essentially from other countries. So if you speak Icelandic and you follow along, you're probably part of the more comfortable middle class. It's great. We still have a functional welfare system, vacation time, the unions are pretty strong, safe, clean water, cheap universities for the most part. So there's very little reason for anyone to question that we need a different system. And so for myself, the reason that I'm organizing anyway and saying that we need a new system is because I think that parties and organizations, they can't just spring up when the crisis happens. You have to be building your case and organizing your party so that when the crisis of the old system manifests, you have some credibility and some way of communicating and explaining why, or otherwise they can just, the wealthy or the powers of the state can fill in the explanation with something made up, but from the other direction, and this is what we're seeing is these swings back and forth from, manufactured right and manufactured left, but you still get the same policies, the same wars, the same economic system.
Welcome to another episode of the Left Agora. My name is Akif, and today I'm joined by Sæþór Benjamin Randalsson from Iceland. Iceland is a country that has fascinated me for many years. I have worked on Icelandic politics academically for a long time, and I have also had the chance to visit the country myself. I have always been deeply impressed by its unique landscapes, culture, and history. Sæþór Randalsson is my first, but certainly not the last guest from Iceland on the Left Agora. Since 2025, he has served as the chairperson of the executive committee of the Socialist Party of Iceland, Sósíalistaflokkur Íslands. And he's also a board member of Efling, one of the largest trade unions in Iceland. We had a thoughtful and engaging conversation, and I'm excited to share it with you. And now, here is my conversation with Sæþór Benjamin Randalsson. As someone who has researched Icelandic party politics for many years, it's a great pleasure for me to have you with us today. I would like to begin with the recent transition in the Socialist Party of Iceland and what it means for the party's direction today. Then we can also discuss its place within the Icelandic left and some broader international developments shaping Iceland's political context. The party experienced a leadership transition in 2025, and you came into this role with a strong trade union background. What has actually changed in the party under the new leadership, particularly in its priorities and strategy? And in the near future, what further changes do you expect?
Good question. So I self-identify as a Marxist-Leninist. So I believe in active party organizing and class analysis. And I also like material analysis. And so it was factual that, well, here in Iceland, political parties get state funding. So it's related to the votes you got in the previous election. And then you're supposed to use that funding to do political activities. And
Yeah.
under the previous chairman, the moment the funds came into the party, they were immediately transferred out 100% into other tax numbers and then used to create a media station that he was the main star of. And, maybe that was a good attempt to bring changes to Icelandic politics by way of a new interview media station, but it didn't result in parliamentary seats for the party in the two elections that happened. And while we had some city seats, there didn't seem to come very much power with it. And so the members of the party wanted to have more of a focus on political activities and to keep the state funding inside of the party and for the leadership to then spend the time and the money that had been spent on a media station to be spent on building up an active party that would try to get seats in parliament and seats in more municipalities than just Reykjavik in order to change laws and have an influence on the legal structure as opposed to just kind of, I guess, swaying people's opinions through a TV channel.
Yeah, yeah. And since you mentioned the party's recent electoral performance, if we look at the party's recent election results, I would like to ask a follow-up question in this regard. The party has not performed badly in the previous two national elections, winning around 4%, but the 5% threshold has kept it out of parliament so far. If it was in another country, perhaps the party would be in the parliament, which will be representing the electorate in the parliament. It has also shown stronger results, as you said, in municipal elections with around 6 to 7% overall. So what do you realistically expect to achieve in the upcoming elections, national or municipal? Especially the municipal elections are approaching. They will be held in this May,
Correct.
if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
So I am also currently wearing the hat of the campaign manager for these elections, and we are going to be running in both Reykjavik and Kópavogur, which is where I live. And we're facing two main challenges. One is that in reality, the organization is kind of starting from this May when the new leadership was elected because of how little focus was put into having an active political party. It would kind of spin up at the last minute when elections happened to try and get the best results possible, but there was nothing really happening within the party in between election times. And so we are essentially having to start up again from zero for these ones. But then also the leadership that lost the election has been trying to undermine the new leadership and using this media station that we all helped build up. Like I myself physically helped craft the recording studio and the previous headquarters where this media station is based in. So we're not just facing the other political parties that don't want us to win. We're facing former comrades that don't want us to win and are running in other parties at the same time. So we have a lot of things against us, but that's politics. Um, I would say now we have the twin goals of getting seats in Reykjavik and Kópavogur, but also maturing and developing our knowledge of how to do it and our for example, we had for the first time a nomination committee that decided who was going to be on our list, who would get elected into the seats. And so they had interviews and deliberated and shuffled the list around and really took it very seriously. And this is the first time we've ever had that. And so the next time we have it, it'll be more mature and we'll have an even better process than this past one. So this is both, a really strong push to get results, but also a learning experience to do even better. For example, when we have parliamentary elections, which as of now are scheduled in 2028, but we have had many governments fall before their time is over. So we really have to be prepared this year, next year, 2028. We'll have to find out.
Yeah, since you mentioned some internal disputes, or maybe not internal disputes, but some disputes with former influential names in the party, do you expect a peace in the near future with
No,
those names? You don't.
no.
I see. Your answer leads me to ask a related question that just came to my mind. Looking at the last parliamentary elections, when I think about the recent parliamentary elections in Iceland, the left green movement and the Socialist Party together received more than 6% of the votes. And perhaps we can increase the party cases, we can increase this left wing spectrum, we can expand this left wing spectrum, and perhaps the percentage could also increase. So, do you think this fragmentation poses a challenge for the Icelandic left today? Or would you not characterize this as fragmentation? Of course, it depends on how you perceive the other party that I mentioned, left green movement. And since you are now mentioning some disputes with the former members as well, uh, it is, I think, important for us to understand what's really happening in Icelandic left.
Mhm. Yes, good question. So these former comrades are actually going into a combined list with the Left Green Party, the Vinstri Græn. So that is who we're facing in the election, and they've now called themselves the Left because it's a kind of Frankenstein list of people from two different parties.
Yeah,
So I was born in the United States and I got my citizenship in 2013 here in Iceland. And my very first vote as a citizen was for the left Greens that resulted in Katrín Jakobsdóttir becoming the prime minister. And
yeah,
I voted for her because she had an anti-NATO, pro-Palestine, feminist, let's increase the low wage salary platform, which was like, well, I like all those things, so I that's who I want to vote for. And then once she became prime minister, she betrayed every one of those policies, and that's one reason why Vinstri Græn got a very poor showing in the last election. She really kind of destroyed the reputation of the party, and they're now having to dig back out of it, which is one reason why they welcomed in the former member of our party because she kind of came with some nice built-in reputation as no muss and fuss. So they looked at it as kind of a shortcut to having redemption or something fresh. But I see within most of the European countries that we have to deal with what I would call a manufactured left. And so they might have great policies on paper, but they don't have any real connection to their members or to the working class. So the moment they might actually come into power on paper or into parliament, into the city, they're incapable of actually wielding power. They don't know how to use it, and even if they did, they're not willing to. So as soon as you become prime minister and you say, okay, we're going to come out of NATO, you get a visit from the American ambassador or maybe the CIA or who knows who has to explain it to you what that really means, what the cost would be for you personally if you want to keep up with this. And then that might explain her pivot. Maybe she was always lying, the prime minister, but we end up not getting these on paper policies that might look great, whether it's the Greens in Germany or Labour in England. So I think collectively in Europe, we are having to realize that we've been given this kind of manufactured left that we have to figure out how to recreate that does have a connection to the members in the party so that if we get a representative who then betrays the policies, we have a way to recall them, discipline them, expel them, whatever it needs to be so that we don't keep getting, an Obama, a Keir Starmer, a Katrín, or it's just going to keep happening. We have a new prime minister who's from a different party, and we're gonna, in my opinion, we're gonna face the same thing. Even though all of her policies sounded pretty good when she came in.
if my memory doesn't fail me, and please correct me if you have also watched that interview. I remember that several years ago, I watched an interview of her. I think it was BBC. And once she was asked about NATO question when she was prime minister, actually, she said something like, since her party is a part of the coalition and since her party doesn't have the majority, also given the previous elections back then, the NATO question was not on the table despite the fact that she was the prime minister and her party was in government. This is just what I remember. But I understood your point about perhaps the party moderation of the left-green movement after government experience. And this also raises a broader question about how the Socialist Party positions itself within the Icelandic left today.
Hmm.
Um, you already mentioned, you already self-identified a Marxist, but where would you place the Socialist Party within today's Icelandic left? And what makes it different from the other left-wing parties in Iceland?
Hmm. I will answer that, but I just want to go real quick back to the Kathrine's
NATO
answer about
question. Of
NATO.
course, of course.
I see the main role of the people like Kathrine or Keir Starmer or anyone else is to come up with excuses that people will accept. So there's always an explanation. Oh, I wanted to do student debt forgiveness. I wanted to close Guantanamo. I wanted to pull us out of NATO, yada, yada, yada. And there's always some, prepared by a think tank or some, whisper in their ear of what they can say as the excuse why they just couldn't do their policies. And some of us are just getting tired of the excuses. Um, but what makes the Socialist Party different is we're one of the only ones that has a problem with the economic system of capitalism. And so while the party itself has not confirmed that we are Marxist-Leninist, we use a lot of these policies. For example, the executive board works with democratic centralism. So we have a debate time, we vote on it, and then whatever we voted on, we all proceed together, even if we were in the minority. Um,
Yeah.
and we look at immigration, housing, uh, low wage jobs, retirement homes, schools, school lunches. It's always about, for us, the relationship between employer and employee, how large pools of capital in the business association can have influence on the government. And we want to work with, suggest, and implement policies that are like direct market intervention. Like we just don't believe that the free market is going to arrive at some healthy equilibrium, and we just need to make like a little tweak here and an incentive here, which is how all of the other parties, whether they say that they're, center right or center left, the only other party that I would say is actually honest about their intentions would be the Independence Party, which is a just completely pro-capitalist party. They don't have a problem with the economic system. They want to make it work better for the wealthiest Icelanders who belong to their party. But I would say they're also Marxists. They understand how the system works and at whose expense and for whose benefit, and they just keep making it even more beneficial for their members. So we want to have a party that also understands the economic system, how it works, and what needs to be changed, but in favor of the workers as opposed to the owners.
Yeah. Since it's an academic interest of mine, I wish I could ask you more questions about other Icelandic parties as well, both extra-parliamentary and also parties in parliament, like the Pirate Party or People's Party. Sometimes some platforms identify such parties as left-wing, center-left, so labels can be also misleading.
Yes.
But I would like to move to another question now. And thank you very much for all those insights. They really give us a better understanding of the party's internal developments, also its place within the Icelandic left and its electoral prospects. Broader international developments, US President Donald Trump's recent statements and rhetoric around Greenland have raised questions about Arctic security and sovereignty, and perhaps not only Arctic security and sovereignty, but um, basically global order questions about the Western order, perhaps. In your party's view, how should Iceland respond to this new geopolitical pressure?
Hmm. Yes. So this is a question that I don't know if I can give you a fully formed answer, because part of the things we've been trying to change is so that when something new happens, that we have the space to meet with a seriousness and then decide with a good internal democratic system, this is our opinion about EU, NATO, Iran, Greenland, so that I could then very confidently, as the current spokesman for the party, tell you this is our opinion. But we're still in the process of building this up. So I can give you
Yeah,
my personal opinion, but they're not. There's other people in the party that would go, mm-mm, that's not what I want, and he's not speaking for me.
I
Um,
see.
so the question would be, is that enough because you're curious about the party, or would you like me to riff from my personal opinion about Greenland and Arctic security?
Since it's a very recent development, and if the party hasn't generated a single policy regarding the developments in the region, of course, I would appreciate hearing your own view.
Hmm. So we have done as a party, we have condemned the initial attack on Iran during the what's called the 12-day war,
Yeah,
with no caveats. We're the only party that didn't add a but you know some side thing excusing it while also condemning it at the same time. We condemned the illegal kidnapping of Maduro in Venezuela, also with no
yeah,
caveats. And then we have republished our condemnation of the attack on Iran with the recent restarting of it. The moment our municipal elections are over, we have right afterwards our general meeting where all the leadership faces re-election. So we have to take that very seriously. And then assuming that the leadership has a continuation past that, we're immediately going to start up a series of what is the party's policy on joining the European Union or not, because we have that national referendum coming up this year.
yeah.
So we want to have like a firm policy. Right now, the previous policy is we support a national referendum and whatever people vote for, we'll stick with. And there are many people who want to have a much firmer, we recommend this. And my personal opinion is no, thank you. And
Yeah.
I have the feeling that is what's going to carry the day within the party, but I cannot say that with full confidence yet. Um,
Yeah.
Regarding Greenland and Iran and all the recent developments, the party as a whole is very frustrated with the hypocrisy and the lack of independence. Many of us joined a protest last week in front of the foreign ministry because it's not clear if Keflavik military base was used to transport weapons and jets to do the attack on Iran. And when our foreign minister was asked about it, she just said, well, we're an independent nation and we make our own decisions. And that's very obviously just a lie. Like whatever America says they want to do with the Keflavik military base, they get to do. If they're going to bring nuclear submarines here, jets with nukes on them, they're going to kidnap people from the Middle East and take them to Guantanamo. There's nobody in Icelandic parliament that's going to say anything about it. And this kind of hypocrisy where we just get dragged along wherever America does its adventures is not good for the soul of the nation, who is so far has been relatively peaceful and without a military, and now we're sending money to buy American weapons and send them to be used on people on the other side of the world with very little debate. And our media just basically reprints whatever the American opinion is. Like the Icelandic people who read the news have the exact same opinion about the world as Americans who follow along with the news, which is not very healthy and doesn't show independence. Um, so this is a very complicated question because without a military and in a world that we're looking at, you have to wonder, like, well, the first question from Icelanders is always, well, then who are we going to attach ourselves to if not America? Um, and I wish I had a good answer for that, but I'm kind of a anywhere but there kind of answer as someone who came from America specifically to get away from the kind of society that it is. It doesn't actually bring safety; it brings more danger and demolition of society the closer you become entwined with it. So my answer is like all the other places other than America. But these have to be clarified within the party with serious debate. But we of course see a problem with just deciding that you're going to take over Greenland or any other place. But it's much more just kind of a generic things that are against international law. We agree are bad and shouldn't be done, but a more cohesive narrative we still have to create as a party.
Even the EU itself, or let's say EU member states, are nowadays questioning the future security architecture of the continents, despite the fact that they have their own militaries and everything, unlike Iceland. So, would EU membership change something in the relationship between the United States and Iceland in terms of security and similar issues, in your
It would just
opinion?
make us more enthralled and captured by America because I really don't see, I'm very happy hearing, Spain showing some independence, but of course, while they're being punished, they have a much more
Yeah,
um, healthy economy to weather these kind of punishments, whereas we could essentially be decimated by economic sanctions here. Um, I don't think that EU membership would bring us any more safety. I think it would bring us much more closely in alignment with the United States.
I understand. I have recently read something about a poll reported by an Icelandic news agency. Icelandic voters appear to be almost evenly divided on the question of EU accession negotiations, with about 52% supporting the resumption of talks and 48% opposing it. So these will be interesting days.
And this is a very big change because when I came here, we also had a poll where it was much more like 65% of Icelanders were against going into the European Union. And recently, I became aware of the United States Information Agency, which was a Cold War apparatus that had over 10,000 employees and spent more than 2 billion US dollars a year funding these. And I noticed that there was an entry for Iceland from 1963. So I wrote to the Roosevelt Institute of Studies and asked for them to digitize the Icelandic copy, which they were very nice and did it for the same day. And it was very depressing because it was all about in 1963 that Iceland was very independent of how America wanted to use us as a military base, essentially. And it was filled with complaints of anti-American sentiment, anti-military sentiment, independence from the European Union or NATO, and that they needed to put more money, more Icelandic translations, and more propaganda in order to change Icelanders' opinions to be more in line with what America wanted. And reading it from 1963, but living in 2026 Iceland, they have gotten what they wanted. So this poll going from 65% against to only 52% against. This is not organic. This is not Icelanders actually knowing what joining the European Union means for Iceland, for our fishing system, for our safety. This is the result of huge amounts of propaganda being blasted nonstop that have changed people's opinions to pave the way for yet another member in the European Union.
Before we conclude, I would like to step back a little and ask a broader question about political engagement in a country like Iceland. As I have said in some of my previous interviews, I believe that even in countries with smaller populations, left-wing forces can play an important role, not only in transforming their own societies, but sometimes also in offering ideas, models, experience, and examples that resonate more widely. That's why I see great value in understanding left wing forces in countries like Iceland as well. So, from your perspective, what would you like to share with us about political engagements, particularly left wing politics, in a context like Iceland? What do you see as the main opportunities and challenges of pursuing left wing politics in a country with a small population?
So I recently gave to the party a lecture on Antonio Gramsci and his ideas of hegemony, organic intellectuals, and the
Yeah.
party as the modern prince. And I used some of Vivek Chibber's newest book and article about how Many kind of new left have misinterpreted Gramsci to be only about cultural reproduction, and that the like influential, media, podcast, television, comedians, all of that they function as a way to essentially keep workers ensorcelled in an unfair system against their own interests. That it would be better if we had a fairer, less capitalist system, but with enough cultural reproduction, you can fool everyone into maintaining the system that we have. And
I
Chibber
mean, they
argued
particularly focus on identity politics.
that's the current flavor. But we've had four great awakenings. For this good book, "We Were Never Woke," goes through anti-slavery, civil rights, feminism, identity politics, and they all have a very similar. So who knows what will be on next? Because all of the big hedge funds like BlackRock and the rest have taken out anything about DEI and identity politics. So the money for these NGOs is drying up. So we're going to get something new, and it'll probably be more of a right-wing flavor, but it's coming. It's not here yet. But in this new interpretation, because Gramsci had to write in code, so you can really read what you want, Chibber argues that it's not just the cultural reproduction that's there, but there's also an economic system
Economic.
that is
Yeah.
designed to a point where you can, for most people, you can get a job, you can buy food, you can educate yourself. And versus if you try and buck the system, there's jail, no funding, difficult to organize, gaslighting from your peers, high paying jobs are locked out. So it really kind of filters you into a certain direction. And Iceland really has that dialed in because the people who have any political opinion whatsoever, they're very homogenous, they're very closely aligned to America, and you can see where they get these ideas from if you turn on the television or open up Icelandic TikTok or Twitter or anything like that. But also the Icelandic society for Icelanders, because we've imported our slave labor essentially from other countries. So if you speak Icelandic and you follow along, you're probably part of the more comfortable middle class. It's great. We still have a functional welfare system, vacation time, the unions are pretty strong, safe, clean water, cheap universities for the most part. So there's very little reason for anyone to question that we need a different system. And so for myself, the reason that I'm organizing anyway and saying that we need a new system is because I think that parties and organizations, they can't just spring up when the crisis happens. You have to be building your case and organizing your party so that when the crisis of the old system manifests, you have some credibility and some way of communicating and explaining why, or otherwise they can just, the wealthy or the powers of the state can fill in the explanation with something made up, but from the other direction, and this is what we're seeing is these swings back and forth from, manufactured right and manufactured left, but you still get the same policies, the same wars, the same economic system. So we're here in Iceland very attached to how the American economy is going. So in 2008, global financial crash happened. Americans lost 10 million homes and we lost 10,000. There's a huge exodus of Icelanders who moved abroad to other more stable countries. All the immigrants went away for the most part. Efling, my union, we lost a ton of members because we're heavy of these like temporary foreign workers.
Yeah.
But there wasn't anything organized. This was 2008. The Socialist Party wasn't around. None of the, old manufactured left parties were ready to explain that it was the economic system that caused it. So we need a different economic system if we want to get out of it. So now we're back in the exact same crisis with some of the exact same people as the front men of the banks and the business association and all these things. But we're headed, of course, into another economic crisis, practically any day now. And so this is something where the ideas and the policies that the Socialist Party are arguing now are not as explanative or popular or possible to catch on while the system largely functions, because our main message is the system doesn't work. But we have, a much more longer term outlook when we're saying it doesn't work versus most people hear, yeah, but it works right now today for me. So I don't really understand what you're talking about. So this is a kind of longer term project that we believe these crises and the housing is going to manifest itself more in the future. And we see that by our membership. We're growing very much in the youth department because the younger people are the ones who can tell how unlikely it is they'll be able to buy a house. They're the ones who have way more expensive university, higher payments for the pool, the visiting the doctor, registering for university. The jobs they have on offer have lower pay. So, like, this middle layer of economic balance to keep you behaving was maybe dialed in for people my age and above. But as soon as you go down to like 30 and below, they're going, I don't think this is what I want. And so this is like our where we see growth potential, but also they have the longest to organize and vote compared to a 70 or an 80-year-old.
Mr. Randalsson, you are summarizing the situation very well. In a country like Iceland, with a small population, is it difficult to convince people with in addressing these issues when you talk about all those problems? To what extent can you reach everyone? I'm especially curious about this as well.
Hmm. Well, if I had a good answer for that, I'd already have parliamentarians, and maybe I would be one. But when we get an opportunity to have substantial debates about policies, there are a lot of people who either nod along or think that these are good explanations. The biggest battle now is actually getting those opportunities because a large amount of people are just literally not engaged because of the aforementioned economic system that largely works. Why would you care about the inner workings of a system that you don't really have problems with? So there's quite a lot of political apathy. And so as soon as you start talking about anything, we're trying to dial stuff down into 1 minute TikToks. And I'm like, how am I going to fit hegemony into 60 seconds? Um, but it's this kind of like, how do you tease someone in, get them more involved? Can you convince someone with a single argument, or does it take an actual lived struggle through something? How do you create a struggle that people will want to come into and participate in? Um, it's like a dark magic or a lost technology that we're rediscovering. But I feel quite positive because when we do get these conversations, it's not really like we're speaking a different language. People can I kind of understand if you explain. Like, I had a an article about house hoarding and how the housing market works that went to the most read article of the opinion pieces for this newspaper. And then I was
Yeah.
invited to be interviewed on the radio about it. And the people who read it and listened to the interview was like, there's nothing there that I disagree with. You explained it succinctly in a way that explains why we're in the problem that we're in now. But the counter, the pro-capitalist, the real estate people, the central bank chair, they get 1,000 to 1 minutes of airtime and exposure to be like, no, 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 it's not that bad, and explain their version of things in comparison. So
Yeah, yeah, I understand. Mr. Randalsson, thank you very much for this great interview. I wish you all the best with your work.
thank you. You as well.
This was a truly inspiring conversation. Once again, I would like to thank Sæþór Benjamin Randalsson for taking the time to join me and share his insights. For more interviews like this one, join me here at the Left Agora by subscribing to the channel. Until next time, let the Agora echo with new voices.